Hello and welcome to Opt to Thrive, episode 23. To supplement or not to supplement? That is the question.
Welcome to Opt to Thrive, your go-to podcast for women's wellness in midlife, designed to educate, support, and inspire you to live your very best life. And now your host, Dr. Karina Sims.
Okay, so today I'm coming to you from my coffee nook. It's been a pretty hot couple of days here in South Australia. And so if I don't get out there on the sun porch before it gets too hot, or if it's been pretty hot from the day before, I got no chance because it's pretty hot out there, no air conditioning. So I had to find another place to record. And I have recorded from the kitchen before, but I've had the dishwasher going and the refrigerator's buzzing. So I thought that I'd try the coffee nook. I've got a really great view out there. I've got a tree full of peaches, and these peaches, they're like the size of a baby's head. They're huge, and they're like heavy, really heavy, full of juice. They're amazing. We still have the figs going. We've got all of our white grapes picked, and now we've got some red grapes left to go. Mulberry tree looks like it's about, well, the mulberry tree's pretty much done for the year. I've got lots of kale going out there, and for the first time ever, I'm growing some broccoli. I'm not sure exactly what it's supposed to look like. I think that it's going well. We'll see. So today we're going to talk about, well, it did turn out to be an interesting subject. I have to say that I have felt like this one's been a little bit of a slog because there's so many other things I want to talk about. But this one, I think lots of people have lots of questions, and I think that it will be quite interesting. And in the end, I actually have really enjoyed doing a lot of the reading for it because I have learned a few things. And that's one of my absolute favorite things to do is to learn. And so I'm pretty excited about what I have been able to come up with for you today. Now, we're going to have to split this into two separate episodes because it's going to be a bit long. And I want you to be able to digest the information. So this is a subject I get asked about pretty commonly. Should I be taking vitamins? Should I be taking this or that supplement? So I wanted to go over some of the most common ones and what the current recommendations are. In doing some reading to make sure that I was giving the most up-to-date recommendations, I found some statistics that I thought were pretty interesting. Apparently, around 43% of Aussies report taking vitamins and supplements. So almost half of us are taking something. 26% of us have taken some digestive system medications. I assume that means things like probiotics or medications for constipation, fiber supplements, that kind of thing. More than half of children report having tried an energy drink. 19% have them weekly and 2% drink them every day. So yes, caffeine is a supplement and they have other kind of things in those drinks as well. Now, in Australia, supplements include a whole range of products. Anything from vitamins and minerals to complementary medicines, herbal therapies, and sports nutrition products like protein powders and other goods that may improve nutrition and performance. Any product that meets criteria to be a therapeutic good has to be registered and regulated by the Therapeutic Goods Administration. So for supplements in particular, the TGA classifies them as either a food or a medicine, and it has to be one or the other. So a medicine can't be a food, and a food can't be a medicine. It's considered a medicine if it's likely to be taken for therapeutic use or has been represented as or declared to be a therapeutic good. If it's a product for human consumption and it's taken orally and it doesn't fall under the medicine category, then it's most likely to be considered a food. Now, why is this important? It's important because of the way both of these things are regulated. So for foods, they are regulated by the states and territories in Australia. And medicines are regulated federally by the TGA. Now, secondly, there are different standards in how these things are regulated. So medicines have tighter restrictions on where and how they can be sold and who can access them. So the way that it works is that the TGA tests higher risk medications that they consider to be higher risk, for safety, quality, and efficacy before they can be legally supplied in Australia. So efficacy means that a product does what it says it's going to do. So when a medicine has gone through this testing and it's approved, it is then registered. You can tell if your supplement has been registered because on the label it will say capital A, capital U, capital S, capital T, space, capital R. So OST R. And then it will have a number next to it. It can be a little hard to find this notation, and you may have to really look for it, but it should be there. So prescription medicines fit into the subcategory of registered medicines as high-risk registered products. Lower-risk registered products do not require a prescription. So products in this category are considered to be lower risk than prescription medications, but still higher risk. So they still require a high level of scrutiny to make sure that they have adequate labeling and therefore appropriate use. So examples of things that would be in this category would be things like mild painkillers, so analgesics, cough and cold medicines, steroid creams, antifungal creams, so things like that. Now, if your medicine says AUSTL, that means it's been listed. Now, this medication is considered to be a lower risk medication, and the TGA has taken their information, and there's been an agreement that the product owner will only use pre-approved low-risk ingredients, make only pre-approved low-risk health claims, and they have to ensure that their product is made under quality manufacturing principles. Listed medications can only use ingredients that the TGA have assessed as being safe and of low risk. So these ingredients are selected from a list that the TGA gives them, and they can have specific requirements attached to them when used. So for instance, things like caffeine. There are restrictions on the amount that can be included in the medication. The indication, so what it's to be used for, is pre-worded. It has to be, again, selected from a list that the TGA provides. The indications that they put on their label, so again, the reason why you would take the medication, that has to be put on the label, the packaging, or in their advertising material, has to be supported by scientific evidence or evidence of a history of traditional use. There are some medical terms that they can't use, so they're very limited in what terms they can use. So, for example, serious forms of a disease, condition, ailment, or defect, something like rheumatoid arthritis or depression, cannot be mentioned on their labels, their packaging, or in their advertising material. And this is because these issues are extremely high risk and too serious to be self-treated with a listed medication. Now, the product owner is also required to have evidence that their product works, and they must provide this evidence if the TGA asks them for it. Okay, so I just want to make it really clear. So the AUSTL, so the listed medications, they are not actually tested for safety and quality or efficacy. It's really an on your honor system. So the product owner has agreed to the conditions of the TGA for that particular medication, but at no time does the TGA actually test the product to make sure that what they say is in the product is actually in the product, and that there aren't actually other things in the product that might not be good for you. It's an on your honor system. It is a legally binding agreement, mind you, but still an on your honor system. Out of interest, I was actually surprised to see that sunscreens are in this category. So I went down a little rabbit hole online looking at all the different sunscreens I would typically use to see if they would all have the AUSTL notation, and they do. I was a bit surprised because I would have thought some of them, maybe at least one of them, was imported. And in fact, the notation was actually really easy to find. It was right there in the middle, on the front, down at the bottom. Easy to find. Which is a different story to the other supplements that I dug out of the cupboard to just have a look out of interest to see what labeling was on mine. And some of them, it was really hard to find. Now there's another category, and this is the AUSTL and then in parentheses A category. And these are what they call kind of intermediate risk medications. And the A stands for assessed. So these medications have been assessed for efficacy. These medications can make intermediate indications or health claims where the listed medicines that we just talked about can't. And they can also include a TGA assessed claim on their label and in their advertising. Now, this assessment means that the medicine's indication, so again, the conditions that the medicine says it's going to treat, is assessed, and it's found that they are supported by scientific evidence. But the quality and the safety of the medication and the ingredients are still on an on your honor basis, like the AUSTL. So if it's listed or listed assessed, none of these get checked to see exactly what's in it and how much is in it. So no quality or safety assessment as such. It's an agreement that they're being manufactured in a quality way and that they have only the ingredients that they say that they're going to have and only approved ingredients. Now, here are a few examples of what you might expect. So for complementary medicines, a few of them might be registered, but most of those are going to fall under the listed or listed assessed category. A lot of over-the-counter medicines will be registered, but then you'll also have a fair few that are going to be under the listed or listed assessed category. And then all prescription medications are going to be registered. None of those will be in the listed or listed assessed category. So if you're getting products online from international websites, they are not regulated by the TGA, and the TGA puts out a warning advising against ordering medications that way because we just don't really know exactly what's in them. And there's no agreement that what they say is in there is going to be in there. So this would include dietary supplements and herbal preparations, things like that. The TGA recommends that we check the legal requirements for its importation and use and also know exactly what's in it. But I don't know how you're supposed to know exactly what's in it. You just have to, I guess, believe what they tell you on the label. Because despite the claims made by the supplement manufacturer that their products are safe and free of substances, especially maybe substances that are prohibited in sport, there is a risk associated with the use of any supplement. So they can contain prohibited substances, so you need to keep in mind that not all ingredients may be listed. And also beware when you're researching the ingredients on the supplement label that some manufacturers may use alternate names. Particularly be wary of ingredients that have chemical names or plant extracts. We're going to talk about a good example of that a bit later on. Now, medicines that don't display the notation from the TGA, the AUST-RL or LA, may not be approved for sale in Australia. And this is especially a concern for, as I said, those products that are sold online, which can contain unlisted, potentially dangerous ingredients. Now, today I want to talk about the supplements I get asked most about and the ones that I initiate discussion around most in my practice. Probably the most common one I get asked about in general is about multivitamins. Should I be taking one? Do I need one? Now, in terms of regulation, depending on the vitamin type and the dose, vitamins are regulated either as registered medicines or as listed medications, listed or listed assessed, as we just covered. So most vitamins fall into the category of listed medicines. Now, the good news in terms of multivitamins is that for most of us who have a reasonably well-rounded or nutritionally complete diet, we don't really need a multivitamin. In fact, I have heard one doctor quoted as saying that multivitamins just give you expensive wee. So when is a diet well-rounded? When is it a nutritionally complete diet? So generally this means that you aren't really excluding any one food group completely out. So, dairy, fruit, veg, meat, protein, grains, cereals, breads. So you're including all the 5 food groups, right? And if there is an exclusion of whole groups of foods, then looking at what you may be missing specifically rather than taking a multivitamin is probably a better bet, because multivitamins actually have 100% and more in some cases of the recommended daily allowance of roughly 26 different vitamins and minerals. So we're going to talk more about those specifics in a minute. Now, there are definitely situations where multivitamins are recommended. So, for example, antenatal vitamins for pregnant women, or for people who've had bariatric surgery, like a gastric bypass. For these people, it could be difficult to get enough of the right nutrients because of the body's demands for nutrients, like in pregnancy, or because they're having difficulties absorbing the nutrients from their diet. And there also might be other situations where a multivitamin could be recommended if someone can't get a nutritionally complete diet because of their appetite, or there's other medical conditions, or even as we age, because often our appetite will drop off, but our nutritional requirements do not. Now, let's talk about a few specifics. We're going to start with calcium. Now, calcium is a mineral, and our bodies need it to build not only what we normally think about is good, strong bones, but also for lots of other things like blood vessel contraction and dilatation, our muscle function, blood clotting, nerve transmission, and hormonal secretion. Our calcium requirements increase as we age. So under 50, we're generally looking at about a requirement of 1,000 milligrams a day. And over 50 or after menopause, we're looking at about 1,300 milligrams a day. So to put that into perspective, a cup of milk has roughly 300 milligrams of calcium in it. Yogurt has close to 400 milligrams for a nice whopping 200-gram serve. A slice of cheddar cheese would be around 160 grams. And then there are other things besides dairy that give a fair amount of calcium. So 100 grams of tofu has around 100 milligrams of calcium. Half a cup of broccoli has around 100 milligrams as well. And then there's also a small amount of calcium in drinking water. The amount depends on where you live and how hard your water is, but it does have some calcium in it. I did find a calcium calculator at the osteoporosis.com website if you're keen to get a better idea of how much calcium you're getting. Now, like anything, it is best to get our calcium from a wide and varied diet. But if you cannot meet this target, especially as a woman around the time of menopause and after, when our bones are becoming at increased risk of thinning, then taking a supplement of 500 to 600 milligrams a day is a good idea. The benefits are generally considered to outweigh the risks. You may hear there has been some controversy about a risk associated with cardiovascular disease for calcium supplements, just so that you are aware. But again, if we can get it from our diet, great. If we can't, benefits are going to outweigh the risk, most likely in supplementation. Now, naturally, as we're talking about bones, vitamin D has to be the next logical supplement we talk about. So vitamin D helps our body absorb all that beautiful calcium, and it also helps with our bone health and immune function and muscle function. So we get vitamin D both from our diet and as a hormone that our bodies make when our skin is exposed to the sun. In Australia, most of the vitamin D that we get in our body comes from the sun exposure. The only foods that really have significant amounts of vitamin D are oily fish, eggs, UV light exposed mushrooms, and fortified margarines and milk. But if you spend enough time in the sun, your body can make all the vitamin D that it needs. In the summer, it can be just a few minutes a day to a few hours a week in the winter. We have to, of course, balance this with skin cancer risk as we live in the skin cancer capital of the world. But I want to throw out a little myth busting right here. Apparently, vitamin D is not affected by sunscreen. In fact, it's really important that everyone in Australia, apart from those who have really deeply pigmented skin, so dark skin, that we wear sunscreen pretty much daily and make it part of our normal morning routine, just like brushing our teeth. The general recommendation is that we need to be wearing sunscreen when the UV index is forecast to get over 3, and for most of Australia, that's most of the year. Now, one of the things that I did not know, and I was thrilled to read, was that vitamin D production is actually done best when we're exercising. Those morning walks are going to be beneficial for lots of things, and now including making more vitamin D. But there is a time constraint. So if we do that before 7, it takes a really long time to get vitamin D production. So if you're going to walk for vitamin D, if you can do that after 7 a.m., it's going to be best. And apparently, there is no advantage to spending prolonged periods of time in the sun because we can only make so much vitamin D in a day. Now, before 7 and after 5, we aren't going to get a lot of vitamin D benefit. In fact, the best UVB rays, the ones that do the job, are found to be around the middle of the day. When the UV index is 3 or above, like during summer, most people maintain adequate vitamin D levels just by spending a few minutes outdoors on most days of the week. So pretty much kind of incidental sun exposure. Now in the winter, we need a bit more time. The guidelines for exactly how much skin should be showing and exactly how long we need, they're pretty complicated. I'm going to put a link in the show notes in case you want to have a look. There are tables that show by month and state and how much skin you're exposing at what time of the day. It's just too much to put in the podcast. So I will put, as I said, a link to those guidelines if you want to have a look. Now, just to give you an idea, in South Australia, we're pretty good if we can get our arms out for an hour between 7 and 8. So go for that walk in the summer, and more than an hour in the winter. By the middle of the day, we only need about 5 to 10 minutes and up to 30 minutes in the winter, and sometimes even less than 5 minutes just on that sun-exposed skin. If you've had skin cancers, especially if you've had a melanoma, or you have that really light skin that burns super easy, I don't need to tell you guys, but I will say it anyway, you guys need to be especially careful around the sun. And most of the year, you guys are pretty consistently doing the 5 sun-safe steps. So you're slipping on some covering clothing, you're slopping on some sunscreen, slapping on a hat, seeking some shade, and sliding on those sunglasses. Now, people with dark skin have more trouble synthesizing vitamin D through their skin because the extra melanin actually blocks the UVB rays of the sun, which are, as I said, the ones that do the synthesizing. So these people need more time outside and have less need for sunscreen, unless they're going to be spending prolonged periods of time in the sun, like over 2 hours. The people that are increased risk of vitamin D deficiency are, as you can imagine, those who avoid the sun, those who spend a long time inside, people who keep their skin covered, people with kidney disease, and people who have malabsorption disorders of the gut. We also get less efficient at making vitamin D as we age. I did find a bit of literature that said that for older adults over the age of 50, rude, that is when that efficiency starts to drop off. And you're going to remember, I'm sure, my 1 in 3 women over the age of 65 will have a hip fracture statistic. Well, an estimated 30 to 40% of those older adults with hip fractures are vitamin D deficient. So another good reason to make sure that we have enough vitamin D. Now, there is a bit of debate about what a normal level of vitamin D is, but in Australia, we generally agree that the recommended level should be above 50 nanomoles per liter. So if you're at risk of low vitamin D, have a chat with your GP about getting your levels checked to see if you need to supplement or not. This is a really good time to remind everyone that too much of a good thing can be not such a good thing. So while vitamin D toxicity is rare, it can happen. So always be sure you're letting your doctor know when you're taking any supplements, not just vitamin D. And if you don't really need it, probably best not to take it. The next one I wanted to talk about is magnesium. We get heaps in plant and animal foods and drinks. Green leafy vegetables like spinach, legumes, nuts, seeds, whole grains, all really good sources. In fact, if you're getting your fiber in general, you're likely getting enough magnesium. Tap, mineral, and bottled waters also can be sources of magnesium. The amount, of course, is going to differ depending on the variety, the source, and the brand. But the reason I threw magnesium in was because I often have people asking if it's any good for sleep or leg cramps. There is some low to moderate quality evidence to suggest that it could be helpful, but like lots of things, we need more good quality research to be sure. And this is going to bring me to an interesting article I found in News GP, which is a publication put out by my college, the Royal Australian College of General Practitioners. Because a lot of people would take magnesium and think, well, it can't hurt, right? Okay, well, again, just want to remind you, too much of a good thing can indeed be a bad thing. So even though magnesium toxicity is rare, it can happen, and you're even more at risk if your kidneys aren't working well. So again, just make sure your doctor knows what supplements you're taking so they can keep an eye on those levels for you. And now, this is a little story just to remind us that we need to be aware of exactly what is in the supplements that we're taking. This is a story about a GP who had been taking a magnesium supplement that was recommended by the pharmacist for her leg cramps and her restless leg syndrome. Now, initially it seemed to be helping. Then after some time, she started getting weakness in her legs, and eventually she got so much weakness that she found it hard to actually walk 100 meters. Now, she went and got lots of testing, finally ended up with a neurologist, and eventually she worked out she had vitamin B6 toxicity. So B as in boy, 6 toxicity, which caused something called peripheral neuropathy. And peripheral neuropathy is a disorder of the nerves in your hands and your feet. Now, B6 can be found in more than 1,000 listed medicines in Australia, but it's also in things like energy drinks, breakfast cereals, and weight loss shakes. We get plenty of B6 in the foods that we eat. It's found in all the food groups, from different meats to various fish, fruit, veg, nuts, seeds, potatoes. Interestingly, when B6 is absorbed through our food, it's not associated with peripheral neuropathy. Now, to put this into perspective, the recommended dietary allowance for B6 varies depending on your age, so somewhere between a milligram to 1.7 milligrams a day. But many multivitamins will have doses of 25 to 50 milligrams in one tablet. And it's often included in other supplements like this magnesium supplement that this doctor was taking. Many people don't realize they're even having B6, let alone that they're sometimes having 50 times more than what's actually recommended. Peripheral neuropathy is a known side effect of vitamin B6, and it causes symptoms of tingling, burning, or numbness, usually, as I said, in the hands or feet. Delayed diagnosis and continued exposure can lead to progression of neuropathy, and in this person's case, muscle weakness. Now, because of this risk, medicines that have daily doses of vitamin B6 over 50 milligrams are now required to have a warning on the label. The warning reads, "Stop taking this medication if you experience tingling, burning, or numbness, and see your healthcare practitioner as soon as possible," and in parentheses, contains vitamin B6. Personally, I recently noticed a new men's health vitamin on the benchtop in my house, not one that I had bought. And so I had a little look at the B6 in this one, and it is listed as 24.68 milligrams per tablet. And I had a look at the warnings, and indeed that warning was listed, and it is a listed medication. So needless to say, we've had a little discussion about whether or not we really need a multivitamin. It is important to know when B6 is included as an active ingredient. Pharmaceutical companies have to list the chemical names on the label, and there are 3 different names to look for because there are 3 different names that could mean B6. Pyridoxine hydrochloride, pyridoxal 5-phosphate, and pyridoxal 5-phosphate monohydrate. Apparently, using the common name vitamin B6 is optional, but they do have to list it as B6 as part of that warning statement that I told you about. It actually has to have the words B6, vitamin B6. Now, the good news in this case is that the toxicity is reversible. We just have to stop overdosing on it. And to do that, we need to be more aware of what we're putting into our bodies, right? Now, while we're on the B vitamins, I'll just mention B12. B12 is found mainly in animal products, so it can be fish, meat, dairy, and then also in some fortified cereals. So those most at risk would be those who don't eat or don't eat many animal products, so vegetarians and vegans, and those who have trouble absorbing it, so people who have inflammatory bowel disease and those who have had gastrointestinal surgery, or they've got some kind of malabsorption syndrome. But people taking certain medications also may be at risk, like people who take metformin or medications for reflux, because they could have trouble absorbing it. The most common cause, though, is something called pernicious anemia. Pernicious anemia is an autoimmune condition. So this is when our bodies make antibodies from our own immune system to attack the cells in our stomach that make a protein called intrinsic factors. And it just means that our bodies cannot absorb vitamin B12. We don't know why this happens, but these people are going to need vitamin B12 injections indefinitely to keep their B12 levels up. So pernicious anemia usually develops in people over the age of 50, and women are more often affected than men. It does tend to run in families. It also happens more often in people who have other autoimmune diseases. So common symptoms of anemia are things like being easily fatigued, especially with exertion, maybe having palpitations, being aware that your heart is beating, and maybe skin pallor, which is pale skin. A couple of other things to look out for with B12 deficiency, in particular, things like tingling hands and feet, and maybe a sore tongue and mouth ulcers. Now, if you're concerned that you could be B12 deficient, it's definitely worth having a chat to your doctor to see if you need to be tested. Okay, guys, I think that is probably a really good place to stop for today. We've covered some pretty common ones. Next time, we're going to talk about things like collagen, protein, fiber, creatine, ashwagandha, turmeric, and fish oil. That might be a long one too. I hope that this has brought a little bit more awareness in how medications are categorized in Australia. And hopefully you'll have a look through your medicine cabinet to see what you got in there and what has been registered, what has been listed, and hopefully you're a bit more aware now when you go to purchase any kind of complementary or over-the-counter medication. So I hope that this has been helpful. If you found it helpful and you can think of someone who might also get something out of it, please do share. And don't forget to rate and review the podcast so that it can be more visible to those who might be looking for this kind of information. And I hope you have a great day, a great week, and until then, I hope you opt to thrive.
The Opt to Thrive podcast is designed for information purposes only and is not engaged in the giving of medical advice. The information provided on the podcast should not be used for diagnosing or treating a health problem or disease. In no way should the information provided by Opt to Thrive be considered medical advice, and at all times the advice of a medical professional should supersede recommendations from Opt to Thrive. If you have or suspect you may have a health problem, you should consult your healthcare provider. The views expressed in this podcast are purely that of Dr. Sims and do not in any way reflect those of the institutions she contracts medical services to.
Thank you for listening to Opt to Thrive. If you've enjoyed listening, please rate and share the podcast. You can visit our website at opttothrive.com and leave a comment for any subjects you would like to hear more about.